Alright, so we just got the firmware update 1.8.1 for the Canon R5. And I have some thoughts about this. Okay, so after months of expectation and hype that a major firmware update was coming for the Canon R5, we finally get to see what version 1.8.1 is all about. And to say it's left me underwhelmed and a little frustrated, yeah, it did. I mean, come on, what is going on here? Why were we led to believe all this stuff was coming in a firmware update that wasn't there? Now, I do want to start off by saying before I go into this, I don't want to make a flame video. That's just not what I like to do. I try and be as positive as possible. So if anyone from Canon is watching this, take this as constructive criticism. Now, once we get our hands on this 1.81 firmware update, of all the things that we were promised, there was really only one major thing included in this update, and that is the IBIS high-resolution shooting mode, which lets you capture a 400 megapixel JPEG by doing this little pixel shift around on the image. Now, why that 400 megapixel image is kind of gimmicky, and I can see certain scenarios where that might be useful, I don't think that most of us out there that are Canon R5 users were really sitting around with this beautiful 45 megapixel image camera and thinking, gee, I just wish I had 10 times more resolution. It's just not something that most of us were just demanding and clamoring for. It's a cool tool to get, but it's not something that's going to really change our everyday workflows. There are things that the Canon R5 absolutely needs to address that would change how we shoot every day. And the biggest one has got to be the removal of that 30-minute runtime limit that has no reason to be on a Canon R5. And for those of you that don't know, this 30-minute runtime limit on the Canon R5 in video mode only exists because of tax laws that used to exist. They're no longer there. That's why all the cameras that have come out since the R5 no longer have a 30-minute tax code. It's just a piece of software code that could easily be removed. Honestly, it should have been removed months, if not a year ago, and it's still there. And it's really frustrating because every time you shoot with the Canon R5, you are fighting with this 30-minute limit. This is a firmware update that absolutely needs to be implemented, and I was so excited when I heard the rumors of it, and even the other rumors that were coming, that were supposed to be coming in this major update, I could have lived without. I could have waited for them. But the 30-minute one is something that affects me every day. I think it affects most shooters out there on the Canon R5, and Canon, we were very disappointed this did not come out in this update. Now, all that being said, I do think it's important to make sure we stay positive and say this update is really geared toward the photographers and not the videographers who use the Canon R5. And you know, let's be honest, we can't really complain because the Canon R5 has had some absolutely amazing firmware updates that have completely transformed this camera from what I first got. And they've all been mostly video-centric. So I would say absolutely that those of us that are photo-centric do deserve to get some photo-centric firmware updates for the Canon R5. It is great. I'm not complaining about that whatsoever. I also understand that one of the reasons that Canon might not have included all of the rumored updates that were coming in this firmware update is they were trying to be safe, and they didn't want to basically release a firmware update that then they had to recall, which would be a disaster because things weren't, there were bugs and didn't get figured out. I understand that. But I do think Canon really missed the ball. They could have given us this exact same update, just take out that one piece of code that has the 30-minute limit. I think that would have made people very happy. We could have waited for the focus breathing, other things like that. But man, the code, that 30-minute limit is just really frustrating, and we'd really like to see it removed, Canon. I'd also like to point out that the one feature of this, the 400 megapixel image, is a JPEG, which I found to be honestly kind of frustrating too because I shoot all RAW. I haven't shot JPEG in years. Now, that being said, even though I think this is a frustrating limitation, I think the proper perspective to have of this is this is just kind of like a really random, cool tool to have. And I'd rather have access to it, even if it's JPEG limited, than not have it because while I won't use it very often, and there are a lot of limitations as far as you have to shoot on a tripod, you can't really have objects moving, so it's not really good for, like, say, trees and outdoor stuff. For product stuff, maybe there is some certain benefits to it that you could potentially use. So use it as a tool that you'll occasionally get on there. But all in all, this is just a really frustrating release from Canon, and I think it really comes down to the expectation that came from 2 months of hype. And for 2 months, all these rumors have been out there about what the camera is going, and we haven't heard Canon stamping that down at all. Even if Canon had sat there and said, wait a second, these aren't right, I could have done it. But to wait 2 months and hear all these things that were coming, especially the promise of that 30-minute removal, and not have it there, this leaves us as honestly, it's just kind of an underwhelming release and not what we would like to see for the Canon R5. So Canon, if you're listening, please, we're waiting for that 1.82 release to get rid of this removal and hopefully go out there and completely unlock this camera to its most awesome potential. Anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say about this. Leave me notes and comments down below. And yeah, go out there, keep on shooting, and I'll talk to you soon.